Hey guys, today we'll be covering a 2012 Korean drama miniseries called My Boy. At the start of the series, a girl named Jong Giram arrives in Seoul to study at an elite musical high school. She has come to this particular school as it is where her favorite K-pop idol, Taejin, also studies. On her first day of school, Jong is hopeful that she will do well in her studies. Before heading inside the classroom, a typical group of mean girls approaches her, blaming her for blocking their way. They call themselves a die-hard fan club of Taejin. Hearing this, Jong shares her excitement that she too is a huge fan of Taejin, but the leader of the group only calls her ugly. In the following scene, before Jong can enter the class, she finds out that her idol Taejin studies in the same grade as she does. Elated at what she just found out, Jong shyly introduces herself without taking her eyes off Taejin. After a while, Jong takes her seat, but before she can approach her idol, Irene, the most admired girl in the school, makes her entrance. As Irene steps inside the class, all the boys instantly fall for her exceptional beauty. One of them is Taejin himself, who immediately goes over to talk to Irene and gives her a gift. Meanwhile, a classmate who introduces herself as Jisoo tells Jong that she has no chance to be with Taejin since he likes Irene. Later, we get to know more about Irene, and as it turns out, she is a trend in advertising and is known by the nickname Korea's Little Sister. Her advertising boss talks with the school's principal and explains that Irene has done a lot to promote the school. His only request is to not make Irene share the same room with a girl. However, the principal explains that he has no choice since other parents are already complaining about the school's special treatment of Irene. In the next scene, it is revealed that Irene is actually a boy pretending to be a girl. He complains to his boss that he cannot go on with the disguise anymore, but the latter reminds him that if he didn't pretend to be a girl, he wouldn't be able to attend the elite school. Irene reluctantly obliges and goes to his new dorm room, only to find that Jong is his new roommate. The series then shows a flashback from a year ago, when Irene, whose real name is Hyunwoo, is struggling in his music career. Although he has been given many auditions, he only gets rejected since he is too pretty to be suited for the concept of manly K-pop idols. One day, his boss suggests that he pretend to be a girl so that he can get selected for a photo shoot. Lo and behold, Hyunwoo not only gets selected, but due to his girlish beauty, he also makes it to several magazines and newspapers. Once he becomes popular, he decides to permanently become a girl and names himself Irene. In the present, Irene does a photo shoot while his boss and assistant watch from afar. After the photo shoot concludes, the boss immediately asks his assistant to take Irene out to avoid communication with the media personnel. Meanwhile, the boss notices a reporter secretly taking Irene's photos. He confiscates the man's camera, but after the boss walks away, the latter remarks that he will reveal Irene's secret bit by bit. Later, Irene is angry that she has to share her dorm room with a talkative Jong. She throws away Taejin's gift and prepares for bed. Meanwhile, Jong confronts him for not acknowledging her idol's feelings and instead asks to keep the gift. Irene signals that she can keep it, and Jong rejoices with excitement. At night, Jong sleeps wearing the gift, which turns out to be a t-shirt with Taejin's face on it. On the other hand, Irene cannot seem to fall asleep because of Jong's snoring. So he changes back into himself and sneaks out of the dorm to meet his friends. The following day at the school's canteen, Jong mistakenly collides with Taejin and gets food all over him. Seeing this, the mean girls bully Jong and blame her for pouring food all over Taejin just to grab his attention. Things get worse when the girls notice Jong wearing Taejin's shirt and start beating her. Thankfully, Taejin arrives at the scene and orders the girls to go away. However, he is upset to see Jong wearing his gift instead of Irene. Jong tries to explain the situation, but Taejin understands that Irene doesn't like him and adds that this isn't the first time she threw away his gifts. Elsewhere, Irene sits alone, upset about how he won't be able to perform with his boys' crew since he has to be a girl now. At the same time, his fanboys watch him and conclude that Jong is responsible for Irene's sadness. Later that evening, the fanboys confront Jong and blame her for Irene's mood earlier that day. They attempt to get her to leave the dorm room and sleep in the streets. Jong cannot stand the bullies and furiously throws her shoes at them. Back in her room, she asks Irene if he was the one who sent the bullies to threaten her. But as usual, Irene doesn't open his mouth, fearing she will recognize his manly voice. Jong wants them to be good roommates, but Irene abruptly walks away. Afterward, he encounters Taejin, who is waiting for his crush on the school stairs. Taejin asks if she wants to come to his concert happening this weekend, but as expected, Irene rejects the offer. Meanwhile, the reporter from earlier spies on the pair secretly. At school, Jong sings her favorite song, which catches Taejin's attention. When the class concludes, he asks her if she is free later that day. Obviously, Jong agrees to meet him, hoping that he will ask her out. But it turns out that Taejin wants her to find out what Irene likes. Although devastated, she still agrees to his request. Later that evening, Jong rummages through Irene's stuff to see what he likes. She finds his diary and a real picture of him as a boy. Jong simply thinks he's Irene's brother, but just then, Irene walks in and catches her holding the photo. Enraged at the intrusion, he grabs the photo and storms out of the room. He then goes to his recording studio and practices dance. His boss notices him and orders him back to his dorm room, but Irene is frustrated and insists on removing Jong first. Meanwhile, Jong waits for Irene outside their dormitory, but a group of men approaches her. They start to bully her, but fortunately, Irene arrives and knocks down the bullies. Since he is in his boy form, Jong doesn't recognize him. The following day, Jong's torture continues when the mean girls hit her with a volleyball when she is seen waving to their idol, Taejin. Jong finally collects her courage and hits back. But the fight doesn't stop, so the leader of the group throws the ball back at Jong. Luckily, she dodges the ball, but Taejin, who is standing behind her, gets hit on the head. Later in the nurse's room, Taejin lays on a bed with bruises all over his face. When he hears a knock at the door, he thinks it's Irene who has come to visit him. However, he becomes sad when Jong walks in. She asks how he's doing, but Taejin cuts her off, instead asking her about whether she found out what Irene likes. Jong says she didn't find anything useful, except the fact that Irene seems to like dancing. One night, Irene falls ill, and Jong wakes up to find him sweating a lot. When she tries to call a doctor, Irene falls down on the bed, and his wig mistakenly comes off. Taken aback, Jong attempts to scream, but Irene shuts her mouth. She threatens to complain to the principal, but Irene seems unbothered and once again sneaks away. However, the following day at the principal's office, Jong doesn't reveal the truth, fearing that Irene's life will go downhill. Later, Jong goes to see Irene in his studio. There, she meets with Irene's boss and his assistant, who pleads with her not to expose the truth. They try to bribe her by offering help in making her debut in singing, but Jong gladly refuses since she too doesn't want to reveal the secret, solely because she doesn't want to hurt people. Instead, she demands that Irene follow her instructions when living in the dorm. The following day at school, Jong helps out Irene when he is surrounded by his fanboys. She continues to help him during their extracurricular activities by always siding with him. One day, Taejin approaches Irene and asks if he wants to perform together for an upcoming festival. Since he likes to dance so much, Irene gladly agrees. One night, Irene follows his usual schedule to sneak away from his dorm and go practice dancing, but this time, Jong catches him. She tries to stop him since it's already past curfew, but Irene doesn't care. Later, she too follows him to his studio. At the studio, Jong watches Irene perform his steps, and she is stunned to see him dance so well. Later, they share drinks on the balcony. Jong shares how Taejin is special to her and wants Irene to cancel the duet with him for the festival. She shares that she was a leukemia patient and was hospitalized up until a year ago. Taejin would come to the hospital, sing for the patients, and that is how she started to fall for him. Taejin had promised they would meet once again after she was healthy, which was the only thing keeping her motivated in life. As the two talk, Jong asks Irene why he practices dance so much, to which he replies that he has to succeed. But she remarks that it doesn't seem like he enjoys dancing, but rather fighting against it. This comment leaves Irene confused and sad at the same time. Meanwhile, the mean girls and the fanboys decide to join hands in stopping Taejin and Irene from performing together for the festival. It seems that they do not like each other's idols. In the next scene, Jong comes home to find an MP3 player on her table. When she asks Irene about it, he says that since he didn't want to throw it away, maybe she would like it. Jong is thrilled about the gift and asks whether he is going to a practice workshop for the festival. Irene doesn't want to go, so Jong tells him not to reject Taejin's offer, as anyone would be dying to perform with her idol. The following day at the workshop, Taejin informs Jong that Irene wants her to perform with them for the festival. Jong is surprised and equally happy. But things don't go as planned when the mean girls politely offer a drink to Jong. She suspects that the girls obviously mixed something in it and tries to throw it away. But before she can do so, Taejin grabs it from her and drinks it. Shortly after, he starts having an upset stomach and cannot perform for the practice workshop. Before he is rushed to the hospital, Taejin texts his fangirls to dance with Jong in the workshop. Meanwhile, their teacher announces that the best performer in the workshop will get to perform in the finale of the festival. As the girls get their text, they reluctantly agree to dance with Jong, while she sings her favorite Twinkle song. Elsewhere, Irene's fanboys send a text inviting Jong to a party at the seminar hall, since they want to pull a prank on her and torture her. But instead of Jong, the leader of the Mean Girls falls for their plan when she goes to the hall to search for her lost bangle. Once inside the hall, the door suddenly shut and the light goes off. All of a sudden, she sees a ghost-like appearance on the wall and starts screaming. Meanwhile, Jong receives the text message and heads to the hall, only to find her terrified classmate. Wasting no time, she helps the terrified girl outside. Seeing Jong help her despite being bullied several times, the leader of the mean girls becomes emotional. After a while, Jong goes back to her room, but when she sees that Irene isn't back yet, she goes out to the swimming pool area to refresh herself while listening to her MP3 player. Just then, two of the mean girls arrive and push her into the pool. She loses her MP3 player, and it only causes her to panic. Thankfully, Irene arrives at the scene and saves her. By now, Irene's wig has come off, and she tries to soothe Jong. Suddenly, the girls arrive once again, and seeing Jong with a suspicious boy, they start taking their photos. Meanwhile, the reporter who used to follow Irene also happens to be there, and he too manages to get some shots. The following day, the photo of Jong and a suspicious boy goes viral all over the school. Jong is called upon by her teachers, who scold her for dating inside the school's premises. Jong, however, is thankful that they didn't find out the truth about Irene. The teachers want to know who the guy is, but Jong doesn't tell them anything. Meanwhile, the fanboys and mean girls rejoice at the thought of Jong getting suspended because of the photo. Thankfully, Taejun arrives at the scene and tells the teachers that it was him in the photo. He explains that he heard Jong crying for help and rushed in to save her from drowning. She was so cold that he also gave her a friendly hug. The teacher believes his story, and the matter is finally settled. A while later, Irene arrives at the scene, but when he finds that Taejun saved him from the scandal, he abruptly leaves. On the other hand, the reporter cannot put his pieces together since he doesn't believe that it was Taejun who was with Jong at the swimming pool. In the next scene, Jong is back in her dorm room but cannot fall asleep. She keeps on thinking about how Irene hugged her and saved her from drowning. She then decides to sneak out of the dorm, only to find him in their backyard. The two then talk about the scandal. A while later, Jong asks Irene to teach her how to dance, and they go to his studio. There, Jong forces Irene to teach her the steps, and the two end up having a good time together. The following day at school, Taejun wonders why Jong didn't call him back after he saved her from the scandal. When he sees Jong at the canteen, he immediately asks her. She replies that her phone was ruined when she was pushed in the water. Later, Taejun gifts her with a new phone and tells her that he got it from his sponsors and wanted to help her once again. Back at the dorm, Irene also waits for Jong with the new phone, but when she reveals that Taejun gifted her one, he gets mad. While Jong goes to freshen up, Irene checks her phone and sees Taejun's text asking her what her ideal type is. Already fuming and jealous of Taejun, Irene decides to reply to the text on behalf of Jong. The following day, Taejun makes a fool out of himself at school when he tries to impress Jong. Surprisingly, she finds him weird and walks away, while Taejun realizes that he has started to like her. Later, he asks Jong out to see a musical together, and she shyly agrees. In the next scene, Jong heads out to meet Taejun, but she notices Irene's boss's assistant on the way. He asks Jong if she is coming to Hanyu or Irene's birthday later that evening, but Jong is oblivious about it. So she immediately ditches Taejun and plans a surprise birthday party for Irene at his studio. While preparing for the party on the rooftop, she mistakenly gets locked out. Jong searches for her phone to ask for help, only to realize that she left her purse downstairs. Helpless, she falls asleep. Later, Irene arrives at the rooftop and finds Jong asleep on the bench. He wakes her up and starts to scold her for not picking up her phone. He explains that he was very worried about her. Jong replies that she left her phone downstairs. Irene then asks why she didn't go on a date with Taejun, and the latter reveals that she likes him. Hearing this, Irene/Hanyu embraces her and tells her to stay away from Taejun. The following day, the couple go on their first date and spend time together. Meanwhile, the reporter still tails Irene and secretly takes photos. One day, Irene's boss shares that Hanyu no longer has to pretend to be Irene, since he is now good enough to make a debut as himself. He promises that he will find a way for Hanyu to get admitted to the same school as a boy. In the meantime, the reporter finally finds out that Irene is actually a boy and threatens his boss to expose the truth. Left with no options, the boss offers him a bribe to keep his mouth shut. At the school, the students learn that Irene is retiring from her modeling career and is leaving the school on personal grounds. This shocks everyone, including Jong, who wasn't informed about it before. Jong gets worried when Irene doesn't pick up her calls. Meanwhile, the mean girls and fanboys believe that Irene instead left the school because the reporter threatened to leak his photos of Taejun. So, they decide to take the matter into their own hands and confront the reporter. They snatch his camera, which contains all the evidence of Irene, and delete the photos. The drama then jumps to a year later. Taejun has successfully fallen for Jong now that Irene has left the school, but Jong has lost interest in him. Hyunwoo, on the other hand, is now the leader of his band, Maboy, and a star idol. One day, Hyunwoo visits Jong at school and asks her to follow him. He then takes her to a garden where he hugs her and apologizes for making her wait so long. He then kisses her on the forehead and promises to always be on her side from now on.